You're watching UATV News. My name is Inna Kosinska. Good evening. The Hungarian Foreign Minister arrived in Kyiv with an official visit to discuss the main topics of relations between Ukraine and Hungary. They have remained tense in recent months. What agreements were reached, our journalists know.
Hungary supports sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. This means that there are no grounds to accuse Hungarians of separatism in Transcarpathia. Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó assured. The head of the Ukrainian Foreign Minister in turn said that in order to reload relations, the countries must abandon mutual accusations and move on to a constructive dialogue. I categorically condemn any disrespect for the Hungarian community in Ukraine. And I consider unacceptable any anti-Ukrainian rhetoric that is heard from certain circles in Hungary. There is no reason to believe that Ukrainian Hungarians are prone to separatism, just as there is no reason to believe that the Ukrainian state wants to do any harm to the Ukrainian Hungarians of Transcarpathia. Péter Szijjártó says Budapest is really investing a lot in helping the Hungarian national community in Transcarpathia. And Ukraine should not look for reasons for disagreement in this, but perceive it as a positive moment in relations between the two countries. Transcarpathia should become a story of success. We have already developed a project for the modernization of the bridge over the Tisza in Zahony, and we would like to implement this project. We would like to open a new border crossing between Big Hodas and Big Palad. We are ready to provide a loan of 50 million euros for the construction of roads in Transcarpathia. Relations between Ukraine and Hungary worsened back in 2017 when the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine approved a law on education. According to it, lessons in secondary and high schools should be conducted in Ukrainian. A year ago, the legislation was updated, separately regulating the issue of education by representatives of national minorities. Despite such steps from Ukraine, discussions around the language issue continue to this day. I asked the minister to start working together on the language law, which has caused some tension in our relations. We want to create a working group that will be given the authority to implement the law on education. Today we talked as partners who want to solve problems, as friends who want to solve problems, not create new ones. Therefore, we agreed that a meeting of the Ukrainian and Hungarian Working Group on Education will take place in the nearest future. In addition, ministers have also agreed to hold a Ukrainian-Hungarian business forum. It will take place online. A meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban is also on the agenda. Reported by Vadim Kramer and Yulia Krychkova, UATV News.
Kyiv can count on the support of the White House. The United States stands for territorial integrity of Ukraine. This was stated by Joe Biden during his first phone conversation as president with Russia's Vladimir Putin.
He called President Putin this afternoon with the intention of discussing our willingness to extend New START for 5 years and also to reaffirm our strong support for Ukraine's sovereignty in the face of Russia's ongoing aggression.
Information provocation. This is how advisor to the Ukrainian delegation in the Trilateral contact group Oleksiy Arestovych called the message about transfer of Ukrainians who were illegally detained in temporarily occupied territories of Donetsk and Luhansk regions to Kyiv. According to him, illegal armed groups wanted to put Ukraine in an unfavorable light, but this was prevented by a timely response at the highest level. Information about the release of Ukrainians from prisons on the temporarily occupied territories of Donetsk and Luhansk regions appeared a week ago. However, until now, Kyiv has no data when this should have happened.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sweden, acting head of the OSCE and Linda, was here with us on that day, and they worked for her. They created an informational occasion. They extinguished positive news feeds which she gave in the direction of Ukraine. They created the image that the Ukrainian side did not want real peace, real movement, real release of the hostages. The hype didn't work, therefore. As I understand it, the desire to return them was gone. And I have very big doubts that it was from the very beginning. I believe that this was an informational operation. They did not intend to return anyone from the very beginning.
The concept for the development of the Crimean Tatar language was developed in Ukraine. The project is scheduled until 2032. It was prepared by the Ministry for Reintegration of the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. The document will also be discussed by experts, linguists, and representatives of public organizations. Besides, the ministry also addressed a couple of online language learning platforms with a request to integrate a Crimean Tatar language as well.
The optimal approach to the development of the Crimean Tatar language is the concept of Ukrainian Turkic. After all, this is not only about the duty of the Ukrainian state to protect and develop the language of the indigenous people. We are talking about huge opportunities for the entire Ukrainian nation, which are not fully realized. Today, 170 million people speak Turkic languages, including our strategic partners.
The crimes of the 20th century should never happen again. This was announced by President of Ukraine Vladimir Zelensky on the International Day of Remembrance for the victims of the Holocaust. According to him, we have to do everything possible to not only preserve the truth about Holocaust, but also spread it.
Every year, this task becomes more important and difficult for every society. History shouldn't be just empty words. People have to really understand why we are talking about the International Day of Remembrance for the victims of the Holocaust today, so that everyone understands themselves and be able to tell their children that the fall of Nazism was really the salvation of humanity, the victory of those values that in fact made us a humanity.
The International Day of Remembrance for the victims of the Holocaust has been established in 2005 by the UN decision. The date of January 27th wasn't chosen by chance, as on this day in 1945, the first Ukrainian front of the Soviet army liberated the largest death camp, Auschwitz-Birkenau. According to various estimates, from 1.5 to 4 million people were killed there. An art object, a look into the past, was opened in Kyiv in memory for the victims today. This is a symbolic tree. It contains monoculars through which one can see photographs taken during the mass executions of Jews in Babi Yar. A tree in Jewish traditions is often used on tombstones. A tree with precise branches, a tree that no longer grows, is a symbol of death. Also, the tree in this situation is associated with those bodies that we see on the pavement. It is such a multi-layered symbol. There are many metaphors. Privatization of state banks begins. The International Finance Corporation, having concluded a loan agreement with Ukrgazbank, State Bank acquired the right for 20% of its shares. This is an important signal for foreign companies willing to invest in the financial system of Ukraine. Our correspondent figured out why is it that important to reduce the state's share in the banking sector and prepared to report for you.
The state's share in the Ukrainian banking system is now 60%. Economists say the figure is too high. This happened because of the so-called bank failure during the global financial crisis in 2008, as well as in 2014 and 15. Dozens of financial institutions were called insolvent, and some were nationalized.
Before the crisis of 2014, there were three the most powerful banks: Ukrgazbank, Ukreksimbank, and Oshchedbank. Privatbank was included to this list during the crisis of 2015, and since the end of the crisis, most of the credits which Privatbank lent went to some affiliated companies.
Ukrgazbank is the fourth in the country in terms of assets and retail market share. Now almost 95% of its shares are owned by the state. Ukrgazbank signed a loan agreement with the International Finance Corporation for 30 million euros. In return, it gets the right to become the owner of 20% of the shares of this financial institution. This does not mean that the bank has already been privatized. It means that the bank is getting ready for privatization. This is the beginning of the process. The positive thing is that the state is starting the process of privatization of those state-owned banks after the well-known clearing of the banking sector. It means that there is trust on the part of foreigners and international investors, and it actually opens up numerous transactions that can take place in the private sector, not necessarily the banking sector. One of the strategic goals for the country is to reduce the state share in the banking sector to 25% till 2025. This is also provided by Ukraine's international obligations.
Реформа державного
Reform of the public banking sector is one of the key prerequisites for strengthening the stability of the financial system of our independent Ukraine and the growth of its credit and investing potential, which is very important and is priority for us. According to economists, there are always risks in the world of state-owned banks. In addition, due to the peculiarities of management, they are not always as effective as private financial institutions.
Державні банки потенційно можуть
The state-owned banks could become an instrument for issuing, for example, of political-related loans. Even without this component of political pressure, the question of flexibility remains open as well. If you're under a government official, then you usually have this, let's say, psychological flexibility and much less responsibility than a private bank has.
The private bank remains the largest asset in the state's portfolio. Experts believe that it may take more than a year to sell it to private investors. Ukrainian authorities are working for attracting foreign capital. Reported by Roman Smoler, Yulia Kryczkova, UATV News.
Ukrainian Oleksiy Novitsky set a new record in strongman sport. In December last year, he has already won the World's Strongest Man competition in the United States and obtained a status of the strongest man on the planet. Later, he decided to take a new challenge. Our correspondent will tell you more.
Before the record is set, the participants of the event are being weighted. There are 6 girls who'll be placed on both sides of 120-kilogram mount called super yoke. Oleksiy Novitsky has to walk at least 10 meters with it on his shoulders. He lifts 4 athletes as a warm-up. This is one of my favorite exercises, the super yoke. I have many records of Ukraine in different formats and I won't add another record, live yoke. It is very interesting and very difficult. Oleksiy tunes in and to thunderous applause from the audience sets a new record. The representative of the Book of Records of Ukraine records the achievement. The author of the record is Oleksiy Novitsky. The total weight of the structure is 490 kilograms. The distance covered is 10 meters 45 centimeters, and the time spent is 12 seconds. Athlete Vasily Rostuk, the idol of Oleksiy's childhood, congratulated the strongman with a new record online. It was great. I would not say it was extremely difficult for Oleksiy. At least that's why it looked like. You see, when an athlete reaches a certain level of skill and technically performs the exercise correctly, it looks very easy for the spectator. But it is extremely difficult for an athlete. When asked how he feels in the status of the strongest person on the planet, Oleksiy answered, "Most of all, he is pleased with the attention of fans. Some people write me letters. They thank me for victory, for being Ukrainian. And I'm very happy that I can make ordinary people happy with my work, my hobby. I'm happy about it." The Ukrainian hero is going to confirm the title of the strongest man on the planet on February 27 at the world's ultimate strongman competition to be held in Bahrain. Reported by Roman Smoler, Olena Diduch, UATV News.
That's all for this hour. More updates on our official website, YouTube, Twitter and Facebook pages. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.